let's take a look at what Gipp says. And then we are going to look at the Hebrew, and we are going to look at a very difficult textual issue in Hebrew. For those of you listening via podcast on audio, you're probably going to have to look at this in video because I'm going to be showing it on the screen. I'm going to be talking about it. What? What's the date? I don't know what the date is. I guess it's Thursday the 11th, I guess. If they're listening to it, it's right there in their podcast. Why should I repeat that? That's silly. Anyway, Rich just wandered off for a few seconds there. All right, so let's take a look at what Sam Gipp said. And this will help us to understand why we need to address this particular subject.
So, question. Who killed Goliath?
David.
You think?
Yeah.
You really believe that? Because I believe it. Okay. Well, one of the classics and one of the most devastating things that happens to modern translations is pulling those italics out. Look at 2 Samuel chapter 21. And look at verse 19.
And there was again a battle in Gob with the Philistines, where Elhanan, the son of Jeroboam, a Bethlehemite, slew the brother of Goliath the Gittite, the staff of whose spear was like a weaver's beam.
All right. Now, what do you notice about the brother of?
It's in italics.
Okay. You know, modern translations take those words out because they're in italics. But here in the ESV, it says this: Elhanan, the son of Jeroboam, the Bethlehemite, struck down Goliath the Gittite, the staff of whose spear was like a weaver's beam. So they took the italicized words out, and by doing that, they inserted a double problem. Have you ever heard anybody say this? Lost people say this. Well, the Bible has contradictions in it. Mm-hmm. Okay? Well, the King James Bible doesn't have contradictions in it, but modern ones do. You were told that David killed Goliath. Well, you were told David killed Goliath because in 1 Samuel chapter 17, it says David killed Goliath. And in the ESV, in 1 Samuel 17, it says David killed Goliath. But then you get to 2 Samuel chapter 21, verse 19, it says Elhanan killed Goliath. That's a contradiction. But it doesn't put a contradiction in the Bible. It puts two contradictions in the Bible. Go to 1 Chronicles chapter 20. And 1 Chronicles chapter 20 is a parallel to what you just read. In other words, it's just a second accounting of that battle. And look at verse 5.
And there was war again with the Philistines, and Elhanan, the son of Jair, slew Lami, the brother of Goliath the Gittite, whose spear staff was like a weaver's beam.
In this ESV, this English Standard Version, it has two contradictions. It says David killed Goliath and Elhanan killed Goliath. Then it says, it's a contradiction, it says Elhanan killed Goliath, and it says Elhanan killed the brother of Goliath in the same battle at the same time, double contradiction. It's kind of like this, I got a little story coloring book for one of my grandkids. This coloring book has a mistake in it. It says, David threw a stone and hit Goliath right in the forehead. But we know from the ESV that it wasn't David. It was Elhanan. And I think this, if they can scratch words out of the Bible and put different words in, I guess I can correct a coloring book.
Okay, so there you go. There's your discussion. And notice he just described as scratching words out of the Bible. Well, is that what's going on? Well, we need to take a look at it. And we need to take a look at it in the original language in which it was written. So I have put together, now again, I wanted to have a real nice, pretty graphic here. But let me tell you something. Keynote and PowerPoint and programs like that do not like Hebrew. They do not want to work with Hebrew. They do not like the fact that Hebrew goes from right to left instead of left to right. And they don't like final forms. And they just really, maybe there's specifically Hebrew versions out there someplace. I don't know. But so what I did is I just dumped it into a standard standard text file here. And it's nice and big, pretty easy to see, I think. It's pixelated on my side, but that's life. Hopefully it won't be on your side. And here we have the two texts. 2 Samuel 21:19, 1 Chronicles chapter 20, verse 5. Now, let's read the New American Standard at 2 Samuel 21:19. It says, "There was war with the Philistines again at Gob, and Elhanan the son of Jair-Oregim," keep that in mind, "the Bethlehemite, killed Goliath the Gittite, the shaft of whose spear was like a weaver's beam." Then when you look at the parallel text to that, in 1 Chronicles 25, it says, "And there was war with the Philistines again, and Elhanan the son of Jair killed Lami, the brother of Goliath the Gittite, the shaft of whose spear was like a weaver's beam." Well, they sound almost alike, but there's a real difference between the two. Now, what the King James has done, and someone this morning in channel put a reference, a link to the original, I guess the original 1611 is available online, so you can look at it. And it had the brother of in a font completely other than the Gothic font that was used for the rest of the text. In fact, it looked like our modern fonts. It almost looked like a plain old Times Roman or something. But that was how they did italics, evidently, at the time. And so from the beginning, the King James translators have recognized that there is no "the brother of" in the Hebrew, and that they are providing it. Now, did the King James translators know about this issue between 2 Samuel 21:19 and 1 Chronicles 20, verse 5? Probably. Did they know about the most probable explanation of it, which I'm going to provide to you here in a moment? Brilliant men, maybe they did. Maybe they did. I don't have commentary from them to give you that information, but maybe they did. I agree with the interpretation that lies behind the rendering in 2 Samuel 21:19. When you have parallel texts, you have to allow them to speak. I mean, I've pointed this out. Not only do you have parallels, you have parallels, for example, in between Leviticus and Deuteronomy. Very important to bring the parallels in. There are obviously parallels here between Samuel and Chronicles. Obviously, the studies of the Synoptic Gospels. That's the primary issue you're dealing with. But even in books like Ephesians and Colossians, it's important to bring the Colossian parallel into Ephesians and vice versa. There's reasons for that that we could discuss. But when you have more than one rendering of a story, of a narrative, something, it is always good to allow the light from the one to shine on the other, and vice versa. And given that 1 Chronicles 20, verse 5, is in perfect harmony with the entire narrative that has already been given, and only 2 Samuel 21:19 is out of that harmony of the narrative, then we have to ask ourselves a question. Is there a reasonable, fair understanding of how someone at some point in time could have miscopied what was originally found in 2 Samuel 21:19 into the form that we have today? Now let me show you. Let me see if I can bring this up. I don't know if I can. That's interesting. It's not showing it. Let's see if it shows it now. There you go. Bring that up. All right. Here is one of the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Isaiah scroll. And let me zoom in here and then move around a little bit. You will notice, especially along seams, you have places like right here. Look at that word right there. Right here, you have smudging, you have darkening of the material there, you have darkening over here. I mean, these scrolls are in excellent shape, but not all scrolls are in excellent shape. And you can see here how some, like right here, it's gotten into the writing at this point, gotten into the writing at this point. This is just a part of dealing with ancient writing materials and things like that. That's just something that you're dealing with. And so the question is there a way of looking at these two texts in Hebrew that would explain how 2 Samuel 21:19 arose from the text of 1 Chronicles 20, verse 5? Because 1 Chronicles 20, verse 5 is in harmony with the entire full narrative of what happened in regards to David and Goliath. Because, see, what Gipp is doing is he's taking the easy way out, and my concern here is this. What Gipp is doing is once again hamstringing any meaningful apologetic defense for the inspiration and even preservation of the Bible. Because he is locating the authority for this reading in between 1604 and 1611. And other than a very small little group of wild-eyed fanatics, that's not going to fly in doing meaningful apologetics. I mean, if you want to say, well, yeah, but the Bible was re-inspired between 1604 and 16... It needed to be re-inspired? Really? Did the authors say they were re-inspiring? I mean, it only works in a monologue in very small, independent, fundamentalist Baptist churches in certain areas. It just doesn't work anyplace else. So is there a way to understand what happened here? Well, this is one of the toughest things I've ever tried to explain on the dividing line, because the vast majority of my audience does not read Hebrew. I will be outlining what I'm talking about. I'll try to explain it as best I can. Sometimes serious apologetics is not using the easiest argument. Sometimes there are easier ways of doing it. I don't know of any easier way that is defensible and consistent than to look at this right now. So let's take a look at. Let's go to this screen, full screen. Thank you. All right. So what we're saying is this is the true text and would have been the text that was originally also in 2 Samuel 21:19. So when we look at the differences, there are primarily three differences, and we can understand on the basis of difficulties of sight. You could have had damage to the manuscript. You could have had bad penmanship. You could have had bad eyesight. Certainly as I get older, I certainly recognize that. My arms aren't nearly long enough anymore. There's all sorts of issues that could come up here to where this becomes the foundation of the Masoretic reading in the Hebrew here. The first is that the sign of the direct object, which in Chronicles comes just before Lami. So right here, here's what is being referred to. These two letters right here, eth. This is the sign of the direct object. And what would the direct object be in here? Well, this is where Elhanan killed who? Well, the brother of Goliath, the Gittite. So here is the direct object, Lami, and what is happening is that the copyist mistook this word right here for either BT, I'll use English equivalents here, or BYT, or this, it becomes this word right here. You can see similarity between this and this. And hence you end up with Baith right before Ha Lami. And if you put it together, it's Baith Lahami, which becomes Bethlehemite. Bethlehem, house of bread. And so instead of the direct object and then the man's name, you end up with Bethlehemite. That's the first misreading. Then the copyist misread the word for brother. Here's brother in 1 Chronicles as the sign of the direct object, which is what he's already confused beforehand. Right before Goliath. So this becomes this. There's the sign of the direct object. There's Goliath. So by putting the direct object right before Goliath, Goliath now becomes the direct object of the verb, which is to kill. So now you have a guy, and it's interesting, his name, you'll notice his name in the New American Standard. Let me get back to Elhanan, the son of Ja'ar Origim. Ja'ar Origim. Ja'ar Origim would actually mean the son of the forest of weavers. The forest of weavers is what Ja'ar Origim means. It doesn't make any sense. Now you notice Origim is also, we need to keep the Hebrew up there. They don't need to see me. We'll just keep this up. Here is Origim in 1 Chronicles. It's at the end. A weaver's beam. But it's been moved up to here in 2 Samuel. I'll talk about that in just a moment. So what you've got is, here you've got the direct object. Now it's Goliath. Instead of brother of Goliath becomes Goliath. That's how Goliath becomes the direct object of killed. And then you have the copyist misplacing the word for weavers so as to put it right after Elhanan. And so you have Elhanan, son of, and then you get Ja'ar Origim, forest of weavers, which makes no sense. The weavers belongs here, shaft of weavers, down at the bottom of 1 Chronicles 20, verse 5. So we can see that by seeing how this and this were misread by which are in their right places, make perfect sense in 1 Chronicles 20, verse 5, but they don't make much sense here. We can see how the corruption in the Masoretic text took place, and because we have preserved for us the parallel in 1 Chronicles 20, verse 5, and of course we have the entire story given to us elsewhere in the scriptures, then we can recognize what happened in regards to the original reading of 2 Samuel 21:19. So, we can, there we go. All right, now, you might go, well, that still bothers me. I'm sorry. I realize that it would be much simpler, safer, to just go, don't worry about it. God re-inspired the Bible in 1611, and that's all you need. For a lot of folks, that's more comforting. They forget that we're talking about a handwritten text that has been transmitted to us over the course of what? 2,700 years or so at this particular point. And that we have so few places like this that we even have to look at this is the actual amazing part, not the other way around. I mean, for the vast majority, well, there aren't almost any written texts. I mean, we have written texts from clay tablets from that far back, but we hardly have almost any copies to where we would even be able to start doing textual criticism on those things. There's just almost nothing that has the kind of textual history that the Old Testament texts have. I don't think that the reconstruction that I just provided to you is outlandish. It's not begging the question. The forms, the words are similar. It's very easy to understand in light of a damaged manuscript or just simply carelessness on the mind, on the part of the individual, to see how this could have happened. And in light of the parallel, that is what happened. But when you take the Sam Gipp approach, you might say, well, you get to the same thing, because what you're saying is Elhanan killed Goliath's brother. Yes, he did. He did kill Goliath's brother. But when you come to that conclusion based upon an interpretive line inserted in italics in an English translation, and then you invest that insertion with divine inspiration rather than doing the work you need to do, which the King James translators may have done. But the point is, you need to know this part. You need to know the tough part. You end up destroying any foundation for someone to be able to meaningfully defend their faith against a very hostile world today. They might say, I could never repeat that. Well, okay. But at least you know there's an answer for it and you could dig it out. I mean, Archer has it in his Encyclopedia Bible Difficulties. It's found in various commentaries. You'll find a discussion of it. You could direct people to it. At least know the parallel in 1 Chronicles 20, verse 5. It's good to know that there's that parallel passage there. But the fact of the matter is, I do not believe it's honoring to God's truth to take what we might call the easy way out. Especially because, fundamentally, when you get down the road, that's going to end up completely handicapping you in being able to give a meaningful response and defense of your faith.